Prior to our Planning Advisory and Adjustment Committee meeting, I'd like to read this Pembroke Land Acknowledgement Statement. As we gather today, I would respectfully acknowledge all on behalf of the Council of the community that the City of Pembroke resides on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin people. We thank the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. It is with this statement that we honor and respect the Algonquins on whose land we reside. We'll now call this meeting to order, and can we have approval of the agenda, please? Moved by Councillor Ian, seconded by Marcel. All in favor. Thank you. Carried. Minutes of the July the 29th, 24 having been circulated. Can we have approval of these minutes? Moved by Ed, seconded by Ian. Are there any errors or omissions to the minutes? All in favor. Carried. Thank you very much. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof? Seeing none, we'll move on to new business, right? Or we, oh, okay. Yeah, please. Do you want to? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So at our last meeting of July 29th, 2024, this committee tabled two concurrent applications for 960 McKay Street due to wishing to ask questions of the applicant, and the applicant was unable to be present. So at the time the applications were tabled, the applicant is still not present tonight. So it would be recommended that these items are tabled again or remain on the table.
Motion to table, Ian. Seconder. Thank you. Marie-José, all in favor of tabling. Thank you very much. New business. First one, A-8. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I think there's somebody stuck.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Somebody obviously has their microphone still on, so we'll just silence it for now.
Oh, okay. Okay, we'll move on then to new business. And the first item is A-824, 612 Elizabeth Street, Catherine Block Donnelly, and it's a minor variance. And can we have a report from the Planning Committee, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The applicant, Catherine Block Donnelly, has submitted a site plan of her property at 612 Elizabeth Street to request an extension of her existing driveway. The existing driveway is approximately 6 meters wide at the property line. The proposed extension is by approximately 2 meters for a total driveway width of approximately 8 meters. The property at 612 Elizabeth Street is zoned residential type 1, R1 by the zoning bylaw. Regarding parking, the zoning bylaw states that the width of a driveway shall not exceed 30% of the width of the front lot line or 6.1 meters, whichever is the lesser. As the property has a frontage of 22.86 meters, 30% of this is 6.86 meters, with 6.1 meters being the lesser of those two numbers, as I previously mentioned. So a total driveway width of 6.1 meters is permitted. As the applicant's existing driveway is already near this maximum width, the applicant is requesting relief from this single provision of the zoning bylaw to facilitate her proposed driveway extension. Ms. Block Donnelly desires the proposed extension so that her driveway will be in line with her 2-vehicle garage. The relief requested can be considered minor in nature due to its minimal streetscape impact in the neighborhood. Directly across the street from the driveway of 612 Elizabeth Street are the front yards of 615 and 617 Elizabeth Street, meaning there are no driveways directly across from the existing driveway and its proposed extension. Thus, the increase in driveway width would not adversely impact any of these neighboring properties. On the same side of the street, the existing driveways of abutting properties at 610 and 614 Elizabeth Street are both on the extreme northerly and southerly sides of each of those properties respectively, meaning that the proposed driveway extension will still have significant setbacks to these abutting properties' driveways. The proposed wider driveway can be viewed as desirable within the neighborhood as it is able to accommodate more parking on the property as opposed to on street. This being particularly pertinent as this portion of Elizabeth Street receives through traffic from between Deauville Drive and Bell Street. The operations department has commented that the proposed relief would not negatively impact their operations, and they do not register any opposition to the application. Under the official plan, the property is designated residential. Regarding parking, the official plan states that it is intended that the parking capacity in the city shall be increased to satisfy anticipated increasing traffic volumes and parking needs arising from new development and redevelopment, and to alleviate the inadequate parking capacity in areas already developed. The proposed extended driveway will directly meet this aim of the official plan, providing increased off-street parking in this residential neighborhood. And therefore, the planning department is recommending the approval of the minor variance application for 612 Elizabeth Street to grant relief from parking area location on lot, that requirement, in order to allow a 2-meter extension to the existing driveway.
Thank you, Owen. Were there any submissions received regarding this application?
Prior to the meeting, no submissions nor inquiries were received. However, I do believe we have a member of the public in the audience right tonight who is interested in this application.
Okay, could they please come forward?
Mike Fox, 610
Yeah, okay, Mike, yeah.
That good?
All right, can you state
That's
your name, please? And
Yeah, Mike Fox. I'm at 610 Elizabeth Street. And I was just curious for the fact that minor variances are normally for maybe things that can't meet the standards or the codes. And I'm just wondering why we would need at that particular spot an additional 2 meters type of thing, you know? Just curious. I don't see too many other driveways along that area that have a wider than normal culvert there. When the first installation was done just recently, maybe a better idea would be to culvert from my place all the way straight through to that property, because right now the front of my property kind of got destroyed with a deeper than necessary digging for a water flow, which I get. Now, right now, the median is, or not the median, but the shoulder is being eroded substantially. So I'm just wondering when they're going to, or if this gets approved, can they come and fix the remainder of that 2 properties that are involved? So that's just the question I have.
So through you, Mr. Chair, my takeaway from what you said is that you have issues relating to the recent construction of 612 Elizabeth Street that have affected your property.
Well, not the construction itself, but the ditching that they did.
The landscaping.
Yeah.
Okay. So whether that can, we can take down your name and contact information, and I can forward those questions to our operations department.
Okay. I did send a letter myself the other day when they came and did some hydro seeding. Normally you do hydro seeding when everything is ready to go. In this particular case, there's erosion all along both properties, actually, that were not addressed before they seeded it. So I'm just curious to know if that can come up as well. Because if they're going to extend the culvert, I don't know if they're just going to put a piece on or if they're going to take the culvert out and replace the whole thing. Do you know?
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair, I think your questions would be best directed to the operations department for those answers. So again, I will take down your contact information and have them contact you after the meeting.
Okay, like I don't have a problem with anybody making a wider driveway if it's necessary, but can I do the same thing? You just make an application, is that the idea?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, you have to make an application. You have to pay the application fee. You have to give us your proposal. It's evaluated by the planning department. A report is prepared and it's presented at this committee, and the committee makes the decision.
Is it possible to put a culvert all the way through the property? Is that a possibility?
Again, that would be a question for the operations department,
Okay,
and I will have them contact
because they
you.
kind of destroyed it there, so we're just looking to maybe get it fixed up a little bit better. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Any other
Mr.
people
Chair.
wanting to speak to this? If not, can we have a motion? I'm sorry.
The applicant is present. Ms.
I'm sorry.
Block-Donnelly
Okay,
is
please.
here.
We can have the applicants like to address the committee. Yes.
So the city came and dug out the ditch, which they needed to do to grade the ditch properly. They came and put topsoil down, and by the time they came back to seed it, some of the topsoil ran down into the ditch. My property, I went out there and I tamped it down and I fixed it up, and I've been watering it and tending to it, as is my neighbor on the other side is doing the same thing. There's really nothing wrong with the ditch, and I cannot see a culvert going through the whole thing. There wasn't one there before, but every driveway on that street around us has a wider opening than what I have. So I don't see a problem. We're having a hard time getting in and out. We've had some health problems and had an ambulance in there and other stuff going on. And some people have almost driven into the ditch because it's so narrow getting in and out of that part of the driveway. So it's aesthetically pleasing to make it bigger, and it's also kind of a necessity. And it would make the neighborhood look prettier, I think, for everybody.
Ian? Okay, sorry.
So I have one question and then probably some comments. And I mean, tonight's a bit of a driveway night. I think this is number 1 of 4. So perhaps this will probably be a comment that I would carry through the whole night. So the normal 6 meter, does that handle 2 vehicles? I'm not gonna lie, I have never measured my vehicles.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So under the zoning bylaws standard parking space sizes, the standard size for a parking space is 9 feet by 18 feet. So 6.1 meters is 20 feet. So yes, it does by the zoning bylaws standards, but I believe if you're in a situation like Ms. Block-Donnelly had where you're needing ambulances and medical services into the property, I believe that's more of a challenge.
So if I could follow up on that before making some comments. So we're talking about like a standard parking space like we would find at the mall.
That's correct.
Okay. I personally would not find that to be the most comfortable day-to-day situation. I mean, obviously we all park at the mall, but I don't think we enjoy how much space we have shared. So I took a drive down, which wasn't as helpful as I thought it was. And then looking at Google Maps aerial view, I would agree with the applicant that most driveways around here seem to have a 2-car situation. I'm going to call it normally situated as opposed to parking lot situated. I mean, at the end of the day, when I look at the aerial view of the construction, I mean, it looks to be a normal sized garage. I can see her point that she just wants the driveway to come out of the garage. It looks very normal to me, which is why my first question was, how did we come up with our 6 meters? Personally, I would personally say that I would find 6 meters to be a little tight to be constantly parking 2 vehicles. So I don't see this as a particular problem. I think most of us now, most of us except me, you do have multiple vehicles in the driveway. And I think these 2-car garages are becoming sort of the norm at this point. So I'm not going to say maybe we should take a look at our standards, but certainly for tonight, to me, it fits in with the rest of her neighborhood. Like I said, the aerial view, even across the street, shows 2 cars, 2 cars, 2 cars. So I'm going to speak favorably to this one and probably to any others that are in a normally situated kind of thing. The one thing that I didn't actually like was the use of the percentage. Because at the end of the day, whether I have a small home, a small yard, or a large yard, the need for two cars is two cars. So I don't necessarily understand the percentage one. I don't know if that's going to come up later on. For this one, it didn't matter anyway because of the other minimum. But I'm going to speak favorably towards this one, and I'd move that we accept the recommendation.
We have a seconder to the motion.
Mr. Chair, I would just like to comment also.
Yes, please.
Following up on Councillor Keel's, it is a two-car garage over there. And that one driveway makes it difficult to access the two-car garage. And Councillor Keel is quite correct. I'm familiar with that area, and there are some of them have more than a double driveway, as Ed would know.
So you're seconding that
So,
motion then?
yeah, I'm seconding the motion and just adding to it that I don't see any problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further comments? All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Next application is A924-136 Craig Street, Brittany McClelland, minor variance and planning. Fort.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
The applicant, Brittany Cleland, has submitted a site plan to construct a single detached dwelling on her property at 136 Craig Street. The property is zoned residential type 2, R2, by the zoning bylaw. The R2 zoning includes single detached dwelling as a permitted use. However, the lot is undersized and does not meet minimums for lot area, lot frontage, or lot depth requirements. Now, regarding the use of undersized lots, a section of the zoning bylaw states that where a lot having less than the minimums for lot area, depth, or frontage required by this bylaw exists on the date of the passing of this bylaw, such a lot may be used for a purpose permitted in the zone in which it is located, provided that all other applicable provisions of this bylaw are met. Ms. Cleland's submitted site plan shows all other applicable zone provisions, including minimums for front yard setback, rear yard setback, interior side yard setback, and dwelling unit area being met or exceeded. However, all other applicable provisions in this bylaw does include parking provisions. Regarding parking provisions, the zoning bylaw requires 2 standard parking spaces for a single detached dwelling. The submitted site plan shows the required 2 standard parking spaces. However, they are configured in an 18-foot wide driveway. The zoning bylaw, as you know from the last application, states that the width of a driveway shall not exceed 30% of the width of the front lot line or 6.1 meters, whichever is the lesser, except that in this case, the width of a driveway, in all cases, the width of a driveway shall not be reduced to less than 10 feet. So in this case, 30% of the 33-foot frontage is 9.9 feet, which bumps the total allowable driveway width up to the minimum of 10 feet. So as such, the relief requested is for 8 feet to allow for a proposed 18-foot driveway up from the minimum of 10 to accommodate the 2 required standard parking spaces. This relief can be viewed as minor in nature at a single item of relief requested for less than double the standard allowance of 10 feet. The requested relief can be considered compatible in the neighborhood as neighboring properties at 131, 132, 134, and 137 Craig all have driveways exceeding 20 feet in width themselves, as you can see in the attached mapping that has been circulated with your reports. Further, the short portion of Craig Street that the property is located on ends in a dead end, meaning that traffic should be minimal on this portion of the street, making for easy ingressing and egressing from the proposed driveway. Lastly, the proposed relief can be viewed as desirable within the neighborhood as it allows all parking requirements to be accommodated on lot as opposed to on street. The property is designated residential under the city's official plan, 2016. Regarding this designation, the official plan states that the city of Pembroke will encourage all forms of residential intensification that creates a potential supply of new housing units. This shall be encouraged in built-up areas of the city. where there is sufficient or planned infrastructure to accommodate. And this minor variance for 136 Craig Street will directly support this aim of the official plan, allowing for residential infill in an already built up area of the city. Regarding parking, the official plan, again, as you heard on the last application, states that it is intended that the parking capacity in the city shall be increased to satisfy increasing traffic volumes and the parking needs arising from new development and redevelopment. And in this case, the proposed widened driveway, again, it directly meets this aim of the official plan, providing increased off-street parking in a residential neighborhood. The provincial policy statement states that land use patterns within settlement areas shall also be based on a range of uses and opportunities for intensification and redevelopment. And this proposed widened driveway will support the intensification and redevelopment of the property, supporting its intended residential use. And therefore, the planning department is recommending the approval of this minor variance for 136 Craig Street to grant relief from the parking area regulations, parking area location on lot requirement in an R2 zone for a single detached dwelling.
Thank you, Owen. Were there any submissions received regarding this application, Owen?
No submissions nor inquiries were received.
Good, thank you very much. No one represents the application. Oh, yes.
Ms. Cleland is present
Good, thank you.
via Zoom to represent her application.
Ms. Cullen?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me again. So I am the owner of 136 Craig Street and am requesting the minor variance to widen my driveway to accommodate my family's needs. My individual household has multiple larger vehicles. The 10-foot driveway width is insufficient for safe and efficient parking. So a wider driveway would allow easier maneuvering of our vehicles, especially during the winter when I know snow is a lot up in your area. And we would have allocated sections of the driveway for snow plus our vehicles as well.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes. Ian.
For all of the same reasons from the last application, I would move that we accept this one as well.
Seconder? Ed? Any further comments? Oh, yes. Thank you, Marie.
I'm curious about the wider driveways in the neighborhood. Like, did they get a minor variance accepted too, or how did that happen?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I would say they're historical. I don't have minor variances on file for them.
Yeah.
But we don't know when they have existed since.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? All in favor of the application? Opposed? Thank you very much. Carried. Thank you. Now we have A1024, 769 Mary Street, Andrew Plummer, minor variance. Planning report, please, Owen. Or, yes.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. So the applicant, Andrew Plummer, has submitted a site plan to construct a semi-detached dwelling with 2 accessory dwelling units for a total of 4 dwelling units on his company's property at 769 Mary Street. The property is zoned residential type 3-10 by the zoning bylaw. The R310 zoning includes semi-detached dwelling under its permitted uses, and up to 2 accessory dwelling units are now permitted for each primary dwelling unit, as per bylaw 2023-61. As such, Mr. Plummer's proposed use of the property is compliant with the zoning bylaw. Regarding lot and setback requirements, all applicable provisions, including those minimums for lot area, lot frontage, front yard setback, rear yard setback, and interior side yard setback, lot depth, and minimum dwelling unit area are met and or exceeded, meaning that the lot and the proposed building itself is compliant with the zoning bylaw. For parking, the zoning bylaw requires 2 standard parking spaces per primary dwelling unit for a semi-detached dwelling, plus 1 standard parking space per accessory dwelling unit, which brings the total number of required parking spaces for Mr. Plummer's proposed development to 6 standard parking spaces. The submitted site plan shows this required number being exceeded with 8 proposed. However, the proposed 8 standard parking spaces are shown as being configured in 2 separate driveways separated by 3 meters with a total driveway width of 10.96 meters. The zoning bylaw requires first that the minimum distance between two separate driveways on one lot shall be 7.62 meters, hence the requirement of relief for 4.62 meters from this provision. And further, as you're going to get very familiar with me saying tonight, the zoning bylaw states that the width of a driveway shall not exceed 30% of the front lot line, or 6.1 meters, whichever is the lesser, hence the requirement of relief for 4.86 meters from this provision. The requested reliefs can be viewed as minor in nature due to minimal streetscape impact in the neighborhood. The property is located at the very westerly end of Mary Street, meaning that there are no driveways opposite the property that would be hindered by allowing these reliefs. The requested reliefs can be viewed as consistent with the character of the neighborhood, as similar reliefs were granted for the immediately abutting 759 Mary Street by a minor variance in 2021. The requested reliefs can be viewed as being desirable in the neighborhood, as they would allow for increased parking accommodation on lot as opposed to on street. The property is designated residential under the city's official plan. Regarding this designation, again, the city will encourage all forms of residential intensification to create a potential supply of new housing units, and this minor variance will support this aim of the official plan, allowing for residential infill and intensification in this built-up area of the city. And regarding parking, it is again, the official plan states that it is intended that the parking capacity of the city shall be increased on lot as opposed to on street. This application is directly in keeping with this aim of the official plan, providing increased off-street parking in this residential neighborhood. And the provincial policy statement again states that land use patterns within settlement areas are based on range of uses and opportunities for intensification and redevelopment. And this application is very much in keeping with the provincial policy statement. Therefore, the planning department is recommending the approval of this minor variance application for 769 Mary Street to grant relief from parking regulations, access, minimum distance between two separate driveways on one lot, and parking regulations, parking area location on lot requirements in an R310 zone to allow for the proposed parking configuration as submitted.
Thank you, Owen. Were there any submissions received regarding this application, Owen?
We did receive a single submission, Mr. Chair, from Patricia Costi-Henry of 312 3rd Avenue. The submission was circulated in your agenda packages.
Yes.
A number of issues were brought up in the submission, including wildlife on neighboring properties, a civil dispute with a neighbor, drag racing on Mary Street, and drainage, but not drainage particular to this property or this application. That's just a summary, but nothing particularly pertinent to the application was brought up.
Can we have a motion, please?
I have a question.
Yes.
With regards to some of the issues brought up by Patricia Costi-Henry, can they be forwarded to the operations department? Are any of them like pertinent to the city operations?
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So the wildlife on neighboring properties isn't particularly a city concern. The area is designated under the official plan for residential development eventually, and the zoning bylaw as well for residential development. So that is, it's not an environmental protection area. It's not an area designated for wildlife. The civil dispute regarding parking in a driveway has actually been referred to bylaw, and it's been deemed a civil dispute.
Okay.
So nothing further would come of that. Drag racing on Mary Street would be an OPP matter, essentially, that could be brought to the attention of the OPP. And the drainage issue is not particularly specific enough about any particular drainage issue to bring to the operations department. But the submission could be run by the operations department if you wish.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Ed.
Mr. Chair, in regards to the letter and the questioning of a limited access to certain property and wildlife, I mean, the property is not owned by the individual that she's referring the wildlife to. That property is owned by someone else. So I would presume that if the individual would be there observing that, those birds and wildlife, she'd probably be in a trespass situation. So, and also from a liability issue, a person that owns that property probably wouldn't want somebody there. I believe it was an old manufacturing site way back, and I'm sure there's probably rebar and things that are sticking out there that may be of an endangerment. And so, with all due respect to Ms. Costi, I understand her, her wish for more greenery in the area, et cetera, but hopefully, that she'll not go there and trespass on the property and enjoy wildlife. In our parks, we have bird feeders, et cetera. So I would just like to extend that and just clarify that, we're not trying to restrict anybody from going anywhere, but I mean, there are parameters of where your property begins and where it ends. Thank you.
Further comments? Yes, Ian.
On the letter or generally speaking?
Well, whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I love the fact that there's 8 parking spots, and the snowbanks tend to get very high and approach all the way to the road, which sometimes has people backing out the rear end of their vehicle without oncoming traffic seeing it. So I'm just wondering, is there any way to put more room between the 2 driveways, or and then what's the reason for the minimum requirement? I don't know who wants to go first.
Owen, do you want to?
I can take that
Oh, okay. Yes, please.
if you want. Okay. So what's going on is what we've done is we pushed the property as far to the as possible. We've left the area for drainage in between the 2 properties. So 759 Mary and 769 Mary have basically been spread as far away as possible. Therefore, we do have a drainage swale that's going to take the water, and the snow from that right-hand driveway can then be pushed to the right, farther towards 759 Mary, and that will alleviate any drainage issues. And then the snow from the other side, the left-hand driveway obviously can push to the left. And why they're so tight is just the way the property was laid out on GIS to be purchased. That Mary Street ends is a dead end, and some of the property actually extends past where that dead end of Mary Street would be. So I couldn't exit onto another person's property. I had to exit onto the road with the driveway. So I had to move the driveways closer together.
Any questions to Mr. Plummer? Yes,
I move that we accept the recommendation.
seconder. Marcel? Any further questions? All in favor? Certainly carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Plummer.
Thank you and good night.
Good night. Next, A1124 and A1224, 604A Weston Street and 604B Weston Street. Brittany McClelland. Owen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the applicant, again, Brittany Cleland, has submitted a site plan to construct a semi-detached dwelling with 2 secondary dwelling units for a total of 4 dwelling units at 604 Weston Street. Ms. Cleland previously applied for consent to sever 604 Weston Street, along with minor variances for both the retained lot of 604A and the severed lot of 604B. Both minor variances were for relief from the minimum lot frontage requirement of 32.81 feet. Both of these lots have frontages of 25 feet instead. These minor variances are now considered final. The consent to sever was provisionally granted, but conditions of the severance have yet to be fulfilled, and therefore the severance is not yet full and final. The property is zoned residential type 2 R2 by the zoning bylaw. This permits semi-detached dwellings, and up to 2 accessory dwelling units are now permitted for each primary dwelling unit by bylaw 2023-61. So as such, the proposed use of the property is compliant with the zoning bylaw. But regarding parking provisions, the zoning bylaw requires 2 standard parking spaces per primary dwelling unit and a single one for each accessory dwelling unit, which brings the total number of spaces required up to 3 spaces each for 604A and 604B. The submitted site plan shows these required parking spaces. However, they are configured in 18 feet wide driveways. And you're quite familiar with this zoning bylaw provision at this point, but the width shall not exceed 30% of the front lot line or 6.1 meters, and it shall not be reduced to less than 10 feet. And in this particular case, 30% of the 25 foot frontages is 7.5 feet, which bumps the total width up to 10 feet. So as such, relief of 8 feet is being requested to allow for 18 feet driveways instead of the standard 10 in these cases. The requested relief can be viewed as minor in nature at a single item of relief requested for less than double the standard allowance of 10 feet. And this can be viewed as desirable within the neighborhood as it allows for all required parking to be accommodated on lot as opposed to on street. The properties of 604 Weston Street are designated residential by the city's official plan. And again, under this designation, we are encouraging all forms of residential intensification to create a potential supply of new housing units. And these minor variances for 604A and 604B Weston Street directly support this aim of the official plan. Regarding parking, the official plan again encourages parking capacity off street to be increased to alleviate parking on street. And these applications directly meet this aim of the official plan. And lastly, regarding the provincial policy statement, again, the provincial policy statement encourages a range of uses and opportunities for intensification and redevelopment where it can be accommodated. And these applications for intensification and redevelopment are directly in keeping with the provincial policy statement. And therefore, the planning department is recommending the approval of the minor variance applications for 604A and 604B Weston Street to grant relief from parking regulations, parking area location on lot, that requirement in an R2 zone.
Thank you, Owen. Were there any submissions received regarding this application, Owen?
No submissions nor inquiries were received regarding these applications.
Thank you very much. Anyone here representing the application?
Hi.
Oh, yes, thank you.
So I'm actually representing this on behalf of my family. So since this property is going to house members of my family, it's again inadequate parking for their vehicles. A wider driveway would allow easier maneuvering of vehicles, especially during the winter with snow, and we'll make sure that there's allocated space for that snow as well as their vehicles.
Any questions for the applicant? Okay, fine. Can we have a motion, please? Yes, Ian, seconded by Marie Jose. All in favor of the application? Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Next application is Z924 Cannabis Production Facility, City of Pembroke.
So in 2015,
Yes.
Council amended the comprehensive zoning bylaw to allow medical marijuana production facilities in M1 and M2 zones, which are industrial zones. Then in January 2020, Council passed a new zoning bylaw, which expanded the definition to allow cannabis production facilities in both those industrial zones. And a cannabis production facility is used for the growing, production, processing of medical and or recreational cannabis, and is authorized by a federally issued license or registration. And no part of this operation, whether accessory or not, may be located outside. The zoning bylaw goes on to state that a licensed producer shall provide to the city a copy of a current and valid production license that's issued by Health Canada. It also states that the facility shall be at least 70 meters from a building, from the building in a lot in a residential or institutional zone, a school or day nursery or community center. It also states no outdoor signage and advertising shall be permitted, and there shall be no accessory open storage. Finally, the zoning bylaw says that a site plan agreement is required for this type of use. So these issues there have been issues with a particular cannabis production facility recently in the city, and the complaints were regarding odor. So a vast majority of these types of operations are operating under Health Canada's registration system to produce cannabis for medical purposes in separate suites in one building. However, there's a lack of inspection from Health Canada. So what that means is they have received authorization from Health Canada to grow a certain amount of cannabis plants. And in many cases, they're growing well over what they're allotted to. So further, they do not meet the requirement like odor controls when they're operating in smaller suites. And this has become a problem in many Ontario municipalities. In previous discussions with Health Canada about the legislation, they have confirmed that medical cannabis can be produced at a site with multiple license holders and individuals with medical cannabis needs. They can appoint an individual to grow the plants for them. There are no restrictions, on the number of licenses permitted on a single parcel or in a building, as long as they are considered separate sites. So Health Canada did note that local municipal bylaws may impose restrictions on setbacks between cannabis production sites and or the location of licensed sites within their jurisdictions. So again, the city has limited cannabis production facilities to M1 and M2 zones, but does not limit the distance between cannabis production facilities, nor does it require any odor mitigation measures. The city did receive a legal opinion regarding multiple licenses in one building. And the city's lawyer, Tony Fleming of Cunningham Swan, indicated this is not something that is regulated under the zoning bylaw. The building owner, further, how the building owner manipulates the federal licensing process is not within the municipality's control. Zoning can impose limitations in form of separation distances, and it might be possible to limit the density of uses within certain areas, but there needs to be land use planning rationale to defend the restrictions. If it makes good planning sense to limit the negative impacts or to restrict cannabis to certain areas of the municipality, then that limitation has to be defended. So many municipalities have established a minimum separation distance that facilities must be away from community-sensitive land uses, such as your schools and your residences. And to assist with this, cannabis production facilities were specifically assessed in the Ministry of the Environment's D6 guideline for compatibility between industrial facilities and sensitive land uses. And this is where the City of Pembroke's 70-meter separation distance was determined. So many municipalities are now adding odor control requirements to the provisions of cannabis production facilities. So licensed producers are expected to obey all relevant federal, provincial, and municipal laws. And the City of Pembroke is proposing, as part of a zoning provision, that a cannabis production facility must submit an odor mitigation plan detailing the measures they will take to prevent and mitigate odor emissions. This plan must include information on the types of air filtration and ventilation systems that will be used. Further, as part of the plan, these facilities would be subject to regular inspection reports to ensure compliance with their odor control plan. These plans would be peer-reviewed at the developer's cost to ensure the odor control plan is appropriate and effective. The Combined Committee of Council recently reviewed this concern about lack of odor mitigation at its meeting of July 16th, and the committee recommended the rezoning process to keep the existing provisions as listed in this report, but to add odor mitigation plans as required for future cannabis production facilities. The official plan states council shall also establish separation distances in the implementing zoning bylaw as a measure to minimize or avoid incompatibility between sensitive land uses. And again, that's where the 70 meters came from. And the provincial policy statement states that major facilities and sensitive land uses should minimize and mitigate any potential adverse effect from odor, noise, and other contaminants to ensure long-term operational and economic viability of major facilities. By adding the requirement for an odor mitigation plan for cannabis production facilities, along with the existing separation distance of 70 meters from the facility to sensitive land uses, will minimize and mitigate any potential adverse effects and ensure compatibility between these uses. So the planning department is recommending the approval of the addition of an odor mitigation plan be added to the zoning bylaw, and a public meeting would be scheduled for October 1st.
Thank you. Colleen, comments? Yes, Ed?
Mr. Chair, just comment. I understand that Health Canada has, some responsibility and involvement to ensure that, that odors are mitigated, that a certain amount of space is between, there's a buffer between residents, et cetera, which falls under our bylaw, obviously. My question is this, and I find it highly irrational that, the statement has been made that you can have someone grow marijuana on your behalf. So you could say to an individual, I'd like you to grow this medical marijuana on my behalf because I perhaps, theoretically don't have the space to grow it. I'm in an apartment. Very good. I go along with that. But who controls who is making the request? How many requests are being made? How does the government control that? We had an issue here some time ago where we had a building with an excess of plants per the space that was the requirement. And to me, it was an illegal grow-op, basically. How do we control that not happening here? I mean, how do you say, well, I'd like to know, okay, who are these people making the requests? Where do they live? What is their, maybe we can't do that under the Privacy Act. But I mean, if you're growing something and if it's illegal, I mean, the federal government has responsibility to us as we have responsibility to our residents to say, you know what, we're in control of this situation. But obviously, we're not in control because nobody comes to check the odor. Nobody really comes and sees, well, geez, they got 5,000 plants in that building. They're only supposed to have 150. So that's my question. And I want an answer from the federal government. I've asked this before. I don't know if we're going to get one or not, but I think they owe us and other municipalities across the country and the province an answer. How do you regulate? When do you regulate? And who does it? That's my question. I have some concerns. Thank you.
Any further comments or questions? If not, can we have a motion one way or the other? Or
I have one comment, but I'll move to support the recommendation. So obviously there was a number of options that Colleen and the department proposed to us, licensing options and other things. I think at this point this is sort of a reasonable first step. Obviously, licensing regimes and that place a great deal of time and effort and cost on the city. And at the end of the day, really, my understanding of it is the problem. And I think it was, frankly, an illegal facility to begin with, was causing a lot of odor problem or whatnot. So the fact that we're sort of front-ending the question of odor with requiring them to have a plan. My understanding from a quick Google search is there are, in fact, engineers that will develop plans and whatnot on a professional basis. So I think by front-ending it with this sort of site plan for odor mechanisms, I think it's a good way to restrict sort of the downfalls on the city in terms of the cost and whatnot of some of the other things. And it's also putting it front and center for the person coming in. So that's why I'm going to recommend that we proceed with this current one. In terms of Councillor Jackno's concerns, I mean, it's what, 2016, 2017, I think the feds moved on the marijuana, and I would agree that it's disappointing that we're still having growing pains, I guess, in 2024, and them not paying attention to what they've done. At the end of the day, I think it's unfortunately a little beyond us, however, and as is sometimes the case, and I think the department would agree with me on this one, the city's not there to fight every single neighbor's battle. We do what we can within a reasonable and an economically prudent way. If individuals are having odor concerns, that does fall under the law of nuisance. And sometimes you have to fight your own battles, as unfair as it might be. But the city can't, we can't stop every neighbor from, whether it's noise or odor or whatnot, from potentially crossing the imaginary boundary between two properties. So I think this is a good reasoned step forward, and so I would move that we accept it.
we have a seconder. Yes, thank you. Any further comments? Yes, Ed.
I will vote in favor of the particular recommendation based on the fact that it makes good planning sense. But I come back again to the responsibility of the federal government, who has said to us as municipalities that don't worry about things. Mitigation will be in place for odor. You don't have to worry about that. But we do have to worry about that because there's no action. And I mean, if the Prime Minister of Canada was living in his, a little bungalow somewhere and they built a grow op right behind his place, well, I don't know what his reaction would be, but I'm sure that, he would object to the fact that, he would be exposed to a certain amount of odor when the federal government has a responsibility to make sure that does not happen. Where are they? I don't mind having it, produced in our community because it's through a law, but then make sure that law itself is being looked at in a proper manner. Thank you.
Yes, Jose.
I agree with the recommendation. It makes a whole lot of sense. I do have a question. So this 70-meter separation that is coming new and the odor mitigation control, just curious, what impact is it going to have on the facilities that have been the source of this issue?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the 70 meters is not changing. So that's been part of the 2020 zoning bylaw.
Okay.
So that's
already
there.
Okay.
So the only thing is to add an odor mitigation
Which will
plan.
come at the cost of the owner. Of the
That's
facility.
right.
Okay.
And they would provide that. And then they would also provide the cost for us to have it peer reviewed by another consultant so that we can make sure, because we're not odor experts,
No.
that that it is going to help.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. Makes sense.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Do we have a seconder to the motion? Yes. Yes. Okay. Thank you. All in favor of the motion? Carried. Thank you very much. The next issue is Z924 Cedar Lane property, City of Pembroke.
So the planning department has recently found some inconsistencies with the zoning of properties along Cedar Lane. So under the city's previous zoning bylaw, which was enacted in 2010, every property on Cedar Lane was zoned with a marker W, which meant that there was municipal water services were available to those properties and that they must be used. But that municipal sanitary sewer services were not available to the properties, so private septic systems could be used instead. So the W marker was accurate and reflected the existing servicing situation of the properties along Cedar Lane. However, when the new zoning bylaw was enacted and it was completed by a consulting firm, the W zoning marker was left off of the properties on Cedar Lane, which now inaccurately reflects the servicing available on Cedar Lane and makes the use of private septic systems a zoning bylaw contravention. So the planning department wishes to correct these inconsistencies under the current zoning bylaw, and we'd like to correct them back to the zoning that they were in 2010 zoning bylaw. So to do so, the zoning bylaw amendment for all properties on Cedar Lane require a housekeeping zoning bylaw amendment. So the zoning of the properties would be changed to a residential type 1-W, which is for water, meaning there's water there, a residential type 1-flood fringe-water, and a floodplain zone. So therefore, the zoning of the properties would remain the same, but only that the W symbol would be added to indicate that there is water service and no sanitary sewer connection. A letter was sent to all owners along the Cedar Lane, to all the property owners along Cedar Lane. The letter is attached in your agenda, and no calls or letters were received in regards to this.
Ian?
I move that we accept the recommendation and get this housekeeping done.
Seconded by Ed. Any further comments? All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Past decision update. One.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So at our last Planning Advisory and Adjustment Committee meeting of July 29th, aside from the matter that was already addressed in business arising from minutes. 3 other applications were heard: a consent to sever for 1106 Boundary Road, a minor variance for 168 Cecil Street, and a minor variance for 135 Bell Street. These 3 applications have all successfully passed their applicable 20-day appeal periods, which makes the 2 minor variances final, and the consent to sever has been provisionally granted.
Thank you very much. Next meeting will be September the 23rd. All in agreement with that? Motion to adjourn. Moved by Ian. That's seconded by Marcel. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm.